looking ahead, what should CIOs, CISOs, and cloud leaders consider now to prepare for the next wave of cloud threats? And what's the one action they should take in the next 90 days?
Go back to your teams, pick a typical complex app, a multi-componentized end-to-end app flow, and ask your team to be able to, and see how long it takes, to be able to provide a list of every single workload that comprises that application, every network path that is taken, and have them show you that you've got at least a filter for visibility of every packet that goes into the workload and comes back out of that workload. What I think you'll find is you can't do it. There's very few CISOs I know that have done it. And so that's the first problem is you better map your environment just so you understand all the workloads, all the communication channels. By the way, we have something called the Workload Attack Path Assessment that helps with that. But then the more important one is, all right, now that you understand that you probably are blind here, we can now go through the exercise.
You did talk about your mission being to secure the world's digital fabric. So that really fascinated me. So can you explain what that means for today's cloud and multi-cloud environment and how organizations should navigate in this space, especially in 2026? What should be the priorities?
Most organizations have been moving to the cloud for at least 3 to 4 years, if not 7 to 15 years. They started with lifting and shifting applications from their data centers over to the cloud. So the applications today tend to traverse at least 10 to 15 different major components end to end. And the dilemma for most organizations is those tend to not be all neatly organized into one region and one cloud, because many companies have gone multi-cloud and still have their on-prem data center. And the characteristics of those workloads are wildly divergent from each other. How they behave, how they're addressed by a network, as simple as, is there a static IP address or not? How long do they live? Are they ephemeral? Do they actually live for a second or 8 seconds? Do they live for 7 months? Do you control them in any way? I don't control Snowflake, but it is mission critical to many of my applications. The attacker is going to figure out which workloads have value and which workloads are unprotected. And if you've got 10,000 or 100,000 or 300,000 of the workloads right now.
Welcome back to the Security Strategist podcast, your roadmap for evolving cybersecurity. I am Shubhangi Dua, the podcast producer, B2B Tech Journalist at EM360 Tech, and your host this episode. Today, we are joined by Doug Merritt, the Chairman, CEO, and President of Aviatrix, a cloud network security company. In this episode, we will cover common visibility gaps, cloud and multi-cloud security's evolving challenges, rethinking network architectures for the cloud era, and how businesses can safeguard workloads while bringing teams across cloud networking and security, of course. So welcome, Doug. It's so great to have you on. How are we feeling today?
Good, thank you. I'm excited to be here, but thanks for having me on. How are you?
Good to have you. Good as well. And I guess I would like to begin this conversation by first setting the agenda for the podcast.
Sounds good.
So what is the ultimate message that you want to send out to the audience today?
That's a great place to start. The core message that we are evangelizing is, in today's modern world, where people have rotated to cloud and they're introducing agentic AI and a bunch of very important and interesting workloads, there is a massive uncovered attack surface that organizations need to focus on if they want to be able to defend themselves. And that unguarded attack surface is the thousands to tens of thousands to sometimes hundreds of thousands of workloads that organizations have deployed across multiple regions and multiple clouds, and or include SaaS, PaaS, APIs, that when you look at the end-to-end fabric of an application, includes all those different elements. So there's a huge attack surface. People are focused elsewhere in general. And my number one job is please pay attention to this. And then, by the way, Aviatrix has some really interesting stuff. But whether you do anything with Aviatrix or not, look at your environment and understand the environment.
Well, it makes sense that the agenda for the podcast is kind of end-to-end security, because when we had our conversation, I believe last month, Happy New Year, by the way, you did talk about you did talk about your mission being to secure the world's digital fabric. So that
Yes.
really fascinated me. So can you explain what that means for today's cloud and multi-cloud environment, and how organizations should navigate in this space, especially in 2026? What should be the priorities?
Yes, and I'll add the second line of our mission statement because we'll wind up covering it. It's part of the complexity to secure the world's digital fabric by bringing together cloud platforms, security, and networking teams. There's a reason why this problem exists. It's because organizations think in organizational constructs and silos, and attackers think in graphs and the entire landscape. And that creates a huge issue for most companies. So what does that mean? Like, what does the environment look like today?
Yes.
Most organizations have been moving to the cloud for at least 3 to 4 years, if not 7 to 15 years. And that progression started usually pretty paced and pretty logical. For most organizations I've worked with through the past 20 years in cloud, they started with lifting and shifting applications from their data centers over to the cloud. And those had a lot of the same properties in cloud that they did within the data center. But then if you really want to use cloud, you either deconstructed and reconstructed those apps and modernized them, or you built complementary capabilities that went around those applications. And those tended to be done in containerized workloads, things like Kubernetes managed containers, and increasingly using serverless constructs within the clouds, things like AWS Lambda or GCP Cloud Run or Azure Functions. And as cloud continued to progress, really cool stuff started to happen. There's all these APIs that were available. There's really powerful PaaS services and third-party SaaS services. So the applications today tend to traverse at least 10 to 15 different major components end to end. And the dilemma for most organizations is those tend to not be all neatly organized into one region and one cloud. Because many companies have gone multi-cloud and still have their on-prem data center. And the characteristics of those workloads are wildly divergent from each other. How they behave, how they're addressed by a network, as simple as is there a static IP address or not? How long do they live? Are they ephemeral? Do they actually live for a second or 8 seconds? Do they live for 7 months? Do you control them in any way? Like, I don't control Snowflake, but it is mission critical to many of my applications, and it happens to be an publicly internet addressable service, or S3, or Salesforce. So that really powerful landscape, like it's driven incredible capability and speed and velocity for organizations, presents this incredibly powerful attack surface. And that when we talk about a digital fabric, that's what we mean. That the end to end, the true value you're trying to get traverses this very divergent and complex and multi-cloud and multi-state set of workloads. And to be effective, you need consistent visibility across all those workloads, and more importantly, consistent remediation capability and control across all those workloads. The attacker is going to figure out which workloads have value and which workloads are unprotected. And if you've got 10,000 or 100,000 or 300,000 of the workloads right now, there's an organization I know that is fully covered across those workloads.
Honestly, I have like multiple thoughts running in my brain right now, especially starting with the amount of workloads that attackers can tap into, because there are so many and people just like cannot monitor every single workload. It is a lot. The number sounds huge. And now, especially with AI, vibe coding in the picture, I feel like while the solutions may have risen a lot, but the attack surface has at the same time widened even more. And it's like the whole AI versus AI picture that's sort of come into play now. It sounds like, oh my god, it sounds like a heavy duty for you. So how do you advise your clients in this sort of modern age? What's the key thing to remember, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. What are the foundational and first principles approaches you can take? And again, going back to our argument, there are historically, and I think even today, there are three core technology layers or capabilities that are relatively pervasive or fully pervasive and provide runtime control and remediation. One is identity. You either have an agent or a human with an identity doing something. So if you see a human doing something, one, validate that it's the right human and all the other great security work. But if you see a human acting in an aberrant fashion and you've got a runtime control around identity, you can extinguish that identity. So that's one both visibility and then pervasive control factor. The second historically has been endpoint. Because we didn't have all these ephemeral workloads in cloud. They were all things like phones or laptops or server racks within a data center. They were stateful. I could put an agent into the OS or into one of the low-level areas of the architecture of that persistent endpoint. And now I've got pervasive capability as well. My phone is acting weird. My laptop is acting weird. I can identify which one it is and I can quarantine that, take remediative control, contain the blast radius. The third is network. Like you've got things on top of compute talking to things on top of compute. If they are not connected in any way, it's very hard to take a nefarious behavior, and the blast radius is already contained. That's not our world. Our world is hyper connected. So going back to the evangelism that we have, the network is a high visibility, pervasive control point that you can actually lean on. Why is that important? Because on a first principles basis, you want a architecture and an approach and a team that you can deploy that covers as much surface area and gives you as much value as humanly possible. Now, why does this matter in the AI world? People are kind of losing their minds again. It's like, oh, everything is different. We got to start over. It's like, not really. I mean, yeah, you've got to augment a lot of these security techniques so that they work with agents or with MCP servers or with vector DBs, but there's a lot of technologies that already exist. What is actually happening as you deploy a series of agents within an organization? They're just workloads. They're workloads with identity. So if you want to provide more effective visibility and then remediative control to contain the blast radius on agentic workloads, you have to work at it. You're either working at a proxy server layer or the network layer. The dilemma with the proxy server is they're not pervasive. Like, what is the pervasive thing? And the problem with these agents is they are highly permissioned, typically, to do their jobs, and they are non-deterministic. And where they use to do all of their work, all of it, they use the darn network. So it's a very fundamental investment, very first principles investment that pays off on a 10x basis because it impacts so much of the landscape in such a broad attack surface area.
Wow. Let's move to a slightly lighter question. Maybe not. Well, what are the biggest trends you see in cloud adoption and multi-cloud networking that are shaping an organization's approach to security today?
Yeah, so I've touched on a bunch of them, but I'll quickly summarize them. One, the diversity of workloads is continuing to increase. Again, the world was way simpler 15 years ago. You didn't have these radically mixed environments with workloads that behave very, very differently. So that's just, it is where it is. And as we've seen over the past 50 years of tech, or at least my 40 years of being in the industry, all the great new things are amazing, but sadly, you don't typically retire the old things. So you wind up adding more things to actually manage, and in this case, to secure and to cover. So that creates a high degree of complexity because a tool built for a security tool, let's just say in this case, a network security tool, built for a static VM doesn't work effectively against a Kubernetes cluster. And those tools don't work effectively against a serverless landscape. And even if you wind up with 3 different tools in one cloud, you go to the next cloud and the definitions are totally different across those 3. They've got different implementations. So one of the major trends that's irreversible is diversity of workloads is increasing. The second is multi-cloud is real. We had this orientation. We had a lot of 8 years ago when I talked to customers, like, we are picking a cloud and we're going to be all in cloud A or B or C. That wound up maybe where companies started. It's not where they ended up. It's very difficult to be in only one cloud based on the different apps and technologies that you use. Office 365 isn't running in OCI. Oracle prefers their database running in OCI and less in other clouds. SAP has got their own cloud as well as trying to be different clouds. So we just naturally, through the apps you're running, and then for different teams' preferences through M&A, most organizations now have 3 or more clouds. And the sovereign cloud issue is just accelerating that. So very diverse workloads, very diverse cloud landscapes. AI is accelerating everything would be my third trend. Couldn't be more excited about AI and where it's actually going. But it does create a much more complex landscape. It moves much more quickly than humans do. And as we talked about, there's usually pretty broad permissions with these agents. There's a whole new identity framework that needs to be put in place, given the speed at which they're spun up and spun back down and the intended volumes of these. OAuth and other technologies have some difficulty with latency and scale and other capabilities. So another really complex and interesting trend. And then the final one that we really center a lot of our cloud native security fabric orientation around is the perimeter has atomized and the internet is increasingly the corporate backbone for transport. And that, go back to 15, 20 years ago, those 2 concepts were fundamental to everything in network security. You had a very known ingress and egress state for the internet, like you're defending your entire data center from the internet. It's super dangerous. Put firewalls and IPS and IDS and a bunch of other things there to make sure that the bad internet can't impact what's inside the data center. Every workload's its own perimeter now. So you've gone from 7 data centers, 7 perimeters to 1,000 or 10,000 or 50,000. That is radically different. And that bad internet is now the enterprise backbone for most transport. So you take the diversity of workloads, the diversity of cloud landscapes, the acceleration and differences that AI is driving, and the fact that the perimeter is atomized and the internet is the major transport vehicle. There are ways to solve it. It's a very, very, very different world out there. And again, that's why I'm jumping up and down with CISOs. Like, lateral movement is where most bad things happen. Like when malware detonates, did it get there on the very first attempt? Like, was an attacker so lucky that somehow they got right to the database or right to the server that made all the difference on their very first attempt? God, no. Like, that never is the way it happens. They got in through some super easy initial entry point, and then they patiently waited and they moved from workload to workload to workload to get that high value asset. And so even the concept of east-west, that it's like, okay, I've blocked north-south. I've blocked ingress and egress to the internet. The rest of the data center is fine. This rack can talk to this rack. I'll have lightweight security. You can't do that anymore. There's no such thing as east-west. It's all lateral movement, and goes back to those 4 trends I talked about and how important this is. Like, no matter where I was working, seeing what I've seen, I would be jumping up and down across the industry saying, guys, we got to fix this. And so it's hard because Aviatrix helps address it. It's like, oh, you just are evangelize this because of Aviatrix. It's like, no, I'm super like our entire society is built on reliable online access. If that goes away, society starts to degrade. So it needs to be fixed. We just got to iterate in advance and make sure that we think in corporations like an attacker. We think in graphs. You've got to understand the entire graph. The network provides it. and the network provides the connection points.
Well, you're right in saying that it impacts society because the society lives on the internet. And one of the solutions that I heard from one of our other clients was that the first thing to do when you don't know what to do and you can see that there's an attack coming is to disconnect the internet. So,
Yes.
I,
Which, again, in the old data center world, it made a ton of sense. Or if it's your laptop, it makes a ton of sense. Like if something starts going wrong, shut off your Wi-Fi. Yeah, that may be actually compromised, but make sure it doesn't have network access and the damage can be at least mitigated or contained. Inside a cloud, like how do you do that? How do you shut off S3? Well, unless you have a cloud native security fabric, unless you have policy enforcement points that are sitting right where that workload sits and actually understands the network pathways, that the S3 bucket, like one of the most prolific services in the entire globe, everyone stores data in S3. It's the entire world copied the object model that AWS evangelized. You can't shut that thing off. Like, how do you turn off the internet? Like, and so I just feel so mystified sometimes, shouting up and down about this is so important. It's like, no, I've got way more important projects. I've got a SASE project I'm trying to drive, or an identity management. It's like, those are important. I agree, those are important, but holy cow, you better add this one to your, better understand it and find a way to add it to your whiteboard quickly. Because with the power of agentic AI and the exposure and attack surface that exists for virtually every corporation globally in the cloud, do not think that even mediocre adversaries are not going to be able to do IP ping and trace and find exposed workloads, plant themselves there. No one's watching the ingress, no one's watching the command and control establishment, and begin to move laterally through your environment. It's certainly my CISO's top priority. I would make it your CISO. If you're a CISO, I'd make it top priority. If you're a CEO, you make it your CISO's. Like, it's got to be added to the whiteboard.
we're going to have a lot of key takeaways from this podcast, especially for decision makers out there. So, what do you see is the biggest gaps that companies tend to put at risk?
So I think the biggest problem, why does this problem exist? It's the frog in boiling water problem. This has evolved over time. Like when you think about, I've got these generations of static VMware-based apps, container-based apps, serverless apps, PaaS services, APIs. That didn't happen overnight. That happened over 5, 6, 7 years. So you've got to be able to take a step back. It's like, wow, that environment's gotten pretty darn complex, and then understand the security implications. And then the second is the industry has not been shouting about networking. It's actually the opposite. Most the clouds did a very good job of saying we're secure, and their data centers are secure. Like, I do not have a lot of fear that there's a bunch of adversaries that come up through an AWS data center and attack through that virtualized layer, attack the bits above them. I worry about the shared responsibility model. Their data centers are safe. You own your workloads. You own the configuration of those workloads. You own the security of those workloads. And I think that there's a lot of confusion. Like, no, the cloud is super safe. It's like, it is. You own your assets. And that's created another inertia element for people's awareness and motivational action. And then the third, which is, I think, the trickiest, is where we started the conversation. Who owns this? Well, it depends. And who needs to fix it? 3 groups. And that creates a lot of complication because I tend to have a networking expert working on networking constructs. And this is, you better understand networking. You don't necessarily have to, this is a plug-in to your network, but you better understand networking. And our distributed cloud firewall and our distributed policy enforcement points use networking. And who deploys it? Well, a cloud platform team, a CI/CD infrastructure as code team. Who sets the policy? Well, a security team, typically. So you've got 3 different organizations that don't even always report up to the CIO that all have a say in the matter. And I think that combination of it's gradually crept up, the shared responsibility model being a little bit vague to many people, and oh my God, I understand it. I've got to get these 3 teams working together is part of the challenge that most CIOs, CISOs, CEOs are facing in this area.
So, do you support diversifying in that case? Do you support outsourcing? So, if there are multiple solutions in an organization and they have to like manage security from different viewpoints, do you support outsourcing that, or I guess different solutions, or do you just support outsourcing it to one security organization to take care of all their other different outsourcing elements? I don't know if I'm framing this right.
I think the challenge is the three groups have skills, they need to exist. Right? You're
Mm.
not going to typically have a security domain expert all of a sudden be a networking domain expert. You're not going to have a app developer be a security domain expert or a networking expert. So we organize in silos for a reason, which is
Mm.
to really be a domain expert on any topic. You've got to spend time, concentrate time in that domain. So the challenge is, how do you bridge the three? Now, how do you give them an architecture and a
Mm.
framework and a tool that they all can work with collaboratively and serve their needs at the same time? And that is one of the elements that we're very excited and proud of with Aviatrix is which is why our mission statement is secure the world's digital fabric by bringing together cloud platform, networking, and security teams. If we can make them all go faster and achieve their goals more quickly because of what we're doing, now it's a free spot in the bingo card. Like I'm a security expert, and because of the tool that we jointly selected, your infrastructure as code pipeline actually goes quicker. Wow, that's seriously? And security is baked into every workload that I instantiate, so that I don't have to worry anymore, and the developer doesn't have to worry about it. Like no one has that. That's really how you make that work. Is you've got to find a way to increase the clock speed and lower the cognitive load across those different groups.
So paint me a picture here. Can you give me an example of when Aviatrix has one of your clients, your a company, reduce a gap between especially net platform networking and security teams? Like,
Yes, so we have 500 customers. We started as a cloud networking company. So with virtually every one of those customers, we are talking to at least the cloud platform team. It just depends whether they've got dedicated networking teams or not. But cloud platform has got to deploy, has got to include what we have, our Terraform scripts and infrastructure as code into their pipeline to get this stuff deployed. So we're always talking to them, usually with the networking team. For roughly 80 of our 500 accounts that have deeply deployed our zero trust workloads, our cloud security solutions, we've now brought all three of those together. And they're all over the globe. I was just in Europe last week, and we're talking about a major drink distributor, a major manufacturer, both in Europe, where we brought together the security teams, the cloud platform teams, the networking teams. But there are major financial institutions, governmental agencies, retailers, hotel chains, airliners around the globe that where we can demonstrate these three groups are sharing a common language and they're getting common benefit out of this tool as we've brought together as we've inserted the cloud native security fabric and made the networking cloud platform and security teams jobs easier in this domain, in this area.
that's a big surface area that you cover as well. It's good to hear that. So
Yeah,
looking ahead.
I like Splunk was another great example of like this is a very hard problem that's been overlooked for a while. It's like a huge problem sitting in plain sight, but to understand it, you got to change your perspective, and then to actually make it work, it's just grueling. It's just really hard. And Splunk was the same where I was before this, where like logs have been around forever. I started coding in the 80s, and you dumped everything in your entire environment to logs to decode. So they've been sitting there in plain sight for a while. How do you take advantage of logs, and who are they valuable to, and how do you present them in a valuable format? Non-trivial technology problem, and that's what the founders of Splunk did an incredible job of doing. That one of the founders, Eric Swan, one of his many tenets was be the garbage collector. Go after logs in this case, like knowing they think they're garbage,
Yeah.
and do something really hard to replicate. And I view Aviatrix as very similar. So that two of the early investors at Splunk are investors here, which is how I wound up here. They called me and said, are you really happy in retirement, or do you want to come back for a really, really, really hard mission? It's like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? I'll come back for a really hard mission. But the nucleus is the same. Like, the network has been overlooked as a visibility and enforcement point in cloud for the reasons we talked about. It is absolutely foundational, just like logs wound up being foundational to IT ops and DevOps and SecOps teams. But it's really hard to do. Like, it's really, really hard to build a cloud native network data plane that works at scale, that can actually deploy thousands or tens of thousands of these policy enforcement points. Distributed data systems are hard. Like, how do they all talk to each other? How do we ensure consistent policy? How do you have consistent policy at a global layer, and then very detailed policy specific to the app team, the developer down at the node? They're hard problems to solve that this team has done a really good job of solving. So it's fun. It's fun, but I've now got to, like with logs, jump up and down and try different creative ways to get people to realize, oh, no, you're right. This is foundational. It is super impactful. And if we want, implement once, get 10x payoff, this is one of those areas, which wound up being the case with Splunk. I love you could ingest data from anywhere and every team could use it. And we didn't start with security. We actually said, don't touch security. We used to call them Splunk huggers. They didn't want to share their Splunk index because they're afraid of the data. So it's like, stay away from security. And then by the time I left in 22, security was the vast majority of our users and our audience. But it's because you had a platform that could be used across so many groups and provide value in so many different ways. And this, I think, is very similar.
Well, the point of security is to actually protect their data. So that,
yes.
Anyway, so now you're reaching the end of the podcast. One final question to you. Looking ahead, what should CIOs, CISOs, and cloud leaders consider now to prepare for the next wave of cloud threats? And what's the one action they should take in the next 90 days?
So the question that I ask when I get a chance to be in front of a CISO, just to try and help ground them on this, on the importance of network and probably how opaque it is go back to your teams, pick a typical complex app, a multi-componentized end-to-end app flow, and ask your team to be able to, and see how long it takes, to be able to provide a list of every single workload that comprises that application, every network path that is taken, and have them show you that you've got at least a filter for visibility of every packet that goes into the workload and comes back out of that workload. What I think you'll find is you can't do it. There's very few CISOs I know that have done it. And so that's the first problem is you better map your environment just so you understand all the workloads, all the communication channels. By the way, we have something called the Workload Attack Path Assessment that helps with that. But then the more important one is, all right, now that you understand that you probably are blind here, we can now go through the exercise. Go through the exercise. Again, you don't have to use Splunk. Find other ways to do this. Sorry, you don't have to use Aviatrix. Find other ways to do this if you want to. But prioritize the workloads and the most dangerous communication pathways and begin to lock those down. I can't tell you the number of Fortune 500 or Global 2000 organizations that I have talked to and have a reasonable understanding of their internal environment that have thousands of workloads with direct internet connections and no filter internet. Not even a NAT gateway sitting next to that workload. And that is just horrific to me. That's just horrific. That's just like, I literally could teach my 13-year-old son in 5 minutes with Claude Code how to plant malware inside all 2,000 of those things that are exposed, Mr. Customer. Like, wow. Please do this. Like, please do this. Please map your workloads. Please map the communication channels between those workloads. And please find a way to put at least a visibility device on every inbound and outbound packet to every one of those workloads. And if you do that, better be close to that source of the workload. Otherwise, your egress costs are going to 10x. And then if you've done that, you may as well put a security solution there so that you don't just watch, you can actually do something.
That was a really good key takeaway. I would say that for sure. So thank you so much, Doug, for joining us today. And thank you to everyone listening. We hope you took a lot away from this episode. And for further information on what we've talked about, please head over to aviatrix.ai. We'll be back next week with another episode in our podcast series. Until then, please make sure you subscribe to this episode on all major platforms and follow the conversation on our socials at EM360Tech on X and LinkedIn. And for more great daily content, please head over to em360tech.com.